Friends! Long time no see. So last week's episode was going to be a big Halloween episode. I had a jack-o'-lantern carved that was going to be my co-host. I was going to get all dressed up, but it just never happened. I don't know if you guys heard, but there was a little storm that came through, and I lost power. So no Halloween episode for you. Maybe next year, though. So this week, I have a double-barreled episode for you. I have to cover 2 weeks of Survivor. I got a lot of ground to cover. So dudes and chicks, let's start with episode 6. So over on
Tandangadang,
there's a rice crisis. Mike Scoopin is eating them out of house and home. Apparently, Mike thinks that if he eats dry rice, it'll cook in his stomach. Which makes me think, I don't ever want to be invited over to the Scoopin household for a home-cooked meal. Mike, if you want to eat raw rice, just soak it in water. It'll puff up and it'll take up more space in your stomach and you won't feel hungry all the time. And your tribe might have more rice. Just a thought. So poor Mike is not very popular on his tribe. I wouldn't be surprised to see him fall in the fire again this season. But this time around, I think it will be one of his tribe mates that pushed him in. So up next is the reward challenge. And during this challenge, Mike and Jonathan are matched up against each other. And at one point, Jonathan says that he and Mike have endurance, and they could do this all night long. Well, apparently not, because for the first time in Survivor history, both tribes decide to basically quit the challenge. And the terms of this negotiated quit are that Calabo gets the reward, which is sandwiches, and
Tandangadang
gets Calabo's rice. Now don't get me wrong, this looked like a tough challenge. Lisa was holding on to Denise tighter than she holds on to her conservative values. Everybody was covered in mud. Mike potentially lost a testicle, but don't worry, all is well. Mike, covered in mud, straddling Jonathan, said this is like heaven. Now Mike, when you say heaven, if you mean a living, breathing hell, then yes, it looked like heaven to me. So the only person on the Calabo tribe who didn't like this negotiated reward challenge quit was Carter. He was like, that's like 5 days of rice. I don't want to give that up. It's 5 days of rice. But nobody listened to him. Over on
Tandangadang,
Artis was pissed. He wanted no part of that deal. Back in the day when Artis was a bodybuilder, he didn't compromise with gravity. He went and lifted the heaviest thing he could find. When Artis was battling cancer, he didn't negotiate any deals with tumors. He beat them down. So this is a guy who wants to win, and I can respect that. So Jonathan's not worried about this negotiated deal. He's got sandwiches tonight, and he'll catch fish. It's easy. Anyway, while Calabaw is feasting on their sandwiches, they get their letters from home. And I must have a heart of stone because after 25 seasons, this has never done anything for me. Carter's letter makes him say, I just want to go home now. It's a good thing that either no one can understand Carter or no one is listening to him. Because that's a great invite for voting you out. Now both Jeff Kent and Denise say that those letters are better than food. Really? I don't know about that. Would you be saying the same thing if you got letters and not sandwiches? They should have given you a choice. Sandwiches or letters? Now, as many of you know, I want to play Survivor. In fact, this past Friday was the deadline for tapes for the next round of casting, and I did get my tape in. But if I ever play Survivor, here's a note to my loved ones. Write me a very long, long letter. But instead of writing it on paper, write it on some cookies or some beef jerky. And don't forget to include some macaroni art from your kids. So after the sandwich feast, everybody on Calabaw has explosive diarrhea. They don't show it, but that's what I assume what happens. If you've been starving yourself and then you eat a giant meal, it goes right through you. So after the unaired Rhea explosion, Jonathan teaches 2 classes. The first class is Fishing 101. The second class is Lowered Expectations 101. Now, in Jonathan's defense, he did actually catch 2 fish. 2 fish that would be very comfortable in a small home aquarium. But he caught 2 fish nonetheless. So after 5 people split up 2 small fish, Jonathan's like, "Woo! I'm not full, but whew, I'm not hungry anymore either." So up next is the immunity challenge. And since
Tandangadang.
has 2 extra players, they have to sit 2 players out. So instead of picking people, they go with rock, paper, scissors. And it just so happens that Abby Maria sits out again. And Jeff Probst calls her out on it, and Abby says, "Cannot you see? It was not my fault. The stone crushed the shears, and the parchment covered the stone. What can I say, Dimples? It is not my game." So the immunity challenge is basically you slingshot a ball and somebody has to catch it. And that's how you score points. And during this challenge, Jeff Probst has to remind Katie that when you're playing with balls, you should have your hand on the pole. That's just a life pro tip. Anyway, when it's all said and done, Calabao loses again. Now what could be making them lose all the time? Denise. Denise was tossing the balls for her tribe. And what kind of sex therapist doesn't know how to toss balls? She's a witch. So Calabao goes back to camp and they have to decide who to vote out. So Carter asks Jonathan Penner, "So you want to vote out Kenny or Penner?" So again, Carter benefits from the fact that no one's really listening to what he's saying, or maybe they can't hear what he's saying. So then it's off to tribal council. Katie, I hardly knew you. So before I quit SurvivorTrev, let's move on to episode 7. Survivor Week 7. You remember when that happened? Long time ago on Halloween night? Anyway, it starts out with a full intro. Now, I'm not sure if CBS is trying to pull a fast one on us here, but there's some people featured in that intro that I just don't remember. Katie? Who's that? Russell? Dana? Zane? Roxanne? I don't remember those people ever playing Survivor. So this day is a really special day because Mike Skupin has never made it this far into the game before. It's also a really special day because Malcolm has never made it this far into the game. Or Denise, or Abby Maria, or Lisa Welchel, or RC, or Artis, or Not So Vanilla Pete. You know, Jeff Kent has never made it this far in this game either. Neither has Carter. But today is also a special day because it's Merge Day. And I have to say, this episode of Survivor was probably my favorite episode in a long time. And I'm probably not going to do it justice in this week's show. But there's so many moving pieces in this one that it's not a regular, predictable Merge episode. And I love it. So Malcolm and Denise are going to be reunited, and there's a lot of talk about that. Which makes me think that there's going to be a big betrayal sometime down the line. And it's not going to be coming from Denise. Now, I don't pay attention to any of the spoiler sites, so that's just my gut talking. So during the customary merge feast, Mike Skupin tells everybody that he has 7 kids at home. So either the man just loves babies, or his idea of birth control is keeping his wife pregnant. So she can't have kids. So the newly merged tribe has a new campsite, and they have to rebuild everything. So while most everybody else is building the shelter, Lisa's estrogen levels go through the roof. Or at least according to Malcolm. She hangs up everybody's clothes to make sure that they're dry and that they're aired out. How come when it's time to clean my house, my lady friend's estrogen levels are nowhere to be found? I mean, if you can see behind this camera, it's not a pretty sight. So you take the good, you take the bad, you take Malcolm's clothes out of his laundry bag, and you find his immunity idol. And Malcolm needs to do damage control. So he channels Not So Vanilla Pete and just diarrhea of the mouth. Denise and I are in a tight alliance. You, me, and Denise are in an alliance. Final 3. Not the best damage control, but apparently Lisa's keeping her mouth shut for now. So Lisa's getting more airtime in this episode than she's gotten since the Facts of Life. Next up for her is a bonding moment with Jonathan Penner. He's the only one that recognizes her from the facts of life. So it seems like Jonathan is sharing a nice moment with Lisa, and he says, "Don't worry, I won't blow your cover." We'll see if that holds true for next week, but more on that later. Now, one of the things that's causing these blurred tribal lines is Jeff Kent's hatred for returning players. Don't get me wrong, he likes them, but he just doesn't want them winning this game. I'd like to ask him what he hates more, returning players or gay marriage. So up next is the immunity challenge. And this challenge couldn't be more perfect. It's a metaphor for what's going on in the game right now. Here's what I'm talking about. You have to hold on to your alliance really tight, like they were holding onto that bar in the challenge. If you don't, it's going to unravel, and then everything's going to come crashing down. So in this challenge, one male and one female could win immunity. And apparently Denise has a handle on things, so she won the female immunity, and Carter won male immunity. By the way, Denise is officially the third little person to play Survivor. The first one was Russell, the second one was Leaf. I've checked this out with the Lollipop Guild. So since we've moved on to individual immunity, it's time to retire the Matt Quinlan Memorial Immunity Rooster. So back at camp, Jeff Kent and Carter are going to cross tribal lines. And that's because of Jeff Kent's intense hatred of returning players. Which begs the question, what's really the difference between a returning player and an actor or a professional athlete playing Survivor? It seems like a distinction without a difference to me. But apparently Jeff Kent just doesn't see it that way. His strategy for tonight's tribal council is to either blindside Jonathan or make him use the idol. And he'll be happy with either outcome. So apparently a four-finger handshake is pretty vicious when you think about it. I never even knew it existed before this season of Survivor. But now I know, and knowing is half the battle. I'm gonna really have to pay attention when I shake hands from here on out. And it makes me think, if I shake somebody's hand and he only has 4 fingers on that hand, he has no choice but to give me a 4-finger handshake. And then, does that give him a blank check to stab me in the back, or lie to me, or cheat me out of something? I'm gonna have to investigate this further. So then it's time to go to tribal council, and Jonathan wisely plays his idol. If he didn't, he'd be getting one of these. So remember that nice little bonding session that Lisa and Jonathan had, where Jonathan said that he wasn't going to blow Lisa's cover? Well, now that Lisa was one of the ones who cast a vote against Jonathan, let's see if that nice gesture holds up. But the bullet ricochets off of Jonathan's immunity idol plaque shield thing, and it hits RC, who now becomes the first juror. And RC was not expecting this. In fact, in her exit interview, she says, "That's the name of the game. The name of the game is blindside." No, it's not. So that's it for this week. And last week. What you need to do is hit the subscribe button right up here. You need to follow me on Twitter, Tout, and Facebook at SurvivorTrev. Now, the past few weeks of my show have been posted pretty late. But that won't be the case with episode 8.